Not everyone is born to follow a dream. Sometimes life simply pushes us in another direction. That was exactly what happened to Eleanor Carter. She was born to play the piano, but instead she spent her nights balancing trays and taking orders at an upscale restaurant in North Carolina. That night, like every other, she rushed back and forth, dodging hurried customers, smiling at demanding tables and pretending not to care. But it was impossible to ignore the black grand piano in the corner of the dining room, always there, still, untouched. If she closed her eyes, she could imagine herself sitting there, playing just like she did as a child. But that wasn't her reality. Her reality was something else. "Eleanor, table 5 wants more wine," said Claire, her co-worker and best friend. "On it," she replied, adjusting the tray. She made her way to the table, serving the customers with her usual efficiency, trying to ignore the strange feeling of being watched. And then she noticed Victor Langley. If there was one customer she wanted to avoid, it was him. Wealthy, arrogant, always with that look that made it seem like he was above everyone else. He enjoyed testing people, as if he were waiting for someone to fail just so he could laugh about it. And that night, for some reason, he was staring right at her. A strange shiver ran down Eleanor's spine. Something was about to happen. Something she had always wanted deep down. But was she ready? Victor Langley enjoyed humiliating people, not in a loud or obvious way. He didn't yell, didn't cause scenes. His specialty was finding a weakness and pressing on it until the person couldn't take it anymore. And now, he had chosen Eleanor. The restaurant carried on as usual. Plates being served, customers chatting, waiters rushing around. But to her, everything felt slower. As if the world had paused just to watch what was about to unfold. Victor leaned slightly in his chair, tapping a finger against his wine glass, studying it as if he were about to take apart a cheap toy. "Funny," he began, his voice slow, like someone who already knew the answer. "I come here every week, always see you serving tables, always so hard-working. But deep down, you're nothing more than a failure, aren't you?" Eleanor felt her blood turn cold. A few nearby customers stopped talking, their eyes drifting toward his table. But Victor didn't seem to care. In fact, he wanted this. He wanted an audience. She swallowed hard and forced herself to stand tall. "If you need anything, I'm here to assist you. Otherwise, I have other tables to attend to." Victor chuckled, a low, mocking laugh. "And is that what you think you were born to do? Serve tables?" She didn't answer. "Just look at you," he continued, adjusting his tie as if he were bored with a dull game. "Wasting your life wiping down plates when you could be doing something, well, assuming you have any real talent." Soft snickers rose from nearby tables. Eleanor felt her face heat up, but she didn't let it show. "You think I don't know?" Victor leaned forward, his voice quieter, sharper. "I know you play the piano. I know this restaurant, that ridiculous tray in your hand, this pathetic little life. None of it is what you really want." Eleanor took a deep breath, trying to ignore the tightness in her chest. "I'm here doing my job. Now, if you'll excuse me." Victor raised a hand, cutting her off as if she didn't matter. "You know what I think? I think you're nothing but a failed dreamer. You probably played piano as a child, thought you'd be famous, and now you're here, cleaning up after people like me." Eleanor bit her lip, resisting the urge to throw the tray in his face. He noticed, and he loved it. "Prove me wrong," he said, nodding lazily toward the piano. She blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "You heard me." Victor smiled, but it was cold, merciless. "Play something. Here, now." The restaurant fell silent. Claire, standing behind the counter, stared with wide eyes. Even the other waiters had stopped to see what would happen. "This is ridiculous," Eleanor muttered, unable to stop herself. "What's ridiculous?" Victor raised an eyebrow. "That you're scared?" More laughter from the crowd. "Or maybe..." He tilted his head, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "Maybe you're just a fraud." The words hit Eleanor like a slap. Victor smirked, satisfied. "That's it, isn't it? You hide behind this mediocre little life because you're afraid. Afraid to fail. Afraid to prove you're not as good as you like to believe. She felt anger bubbling inside her. Her hands trembled, but not from nerves, pure rage. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "Because I can." Just like that. Eleanor wanted to walk away, wanted to turn her back and ignore him. But if she did, she'd be proving him right. If she did nothing, she'd walk away as nothing more than the weak little waitress he was making her out to be. So, without another word, she set the tray down on the nearest table and walked to the piano. The entire restaurant was watching. Every step Eleanor took toward the piano felt heavier than the last. The clinking of silverware softened, conversations faded, as if everyone was waiting for the grand spectacle of the night, the public humiliation of the waitress. It was exactly what Victor wanted. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, wearing a satisfied smile, as if he already knew how this story would end. In his mind, Eleanor would fail. Her hands would shake, she'd miss the notes, embarrassment would consume her, and she'd run back to her tray. And him? He'd have yet another amusing story to tell at his expensive dinners. She stopped in front of the piano, ran her fingers lightly over the cold keys, trying to steady her breath. Her heart pounded in her chest, like it was trying to escape before she could. The fear was there, the anger too. But above all, something else was growing inside her. Enough. Enough of being treated like nothing. Enough of letting people like Victor Langley step on her as if her existence meant nothing. She closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. Then she played the first note. The sound echoed through the restaurant, and suddenly everything changed. The music began softly, hesitant, but soon her hands found their way. The melody filled the room, spreading like a wave. The clatter of silverware stopped. The voices went silent. Eleanor played as if she were alone in the world, the way she did at home after work, when the only audience was the walls of her tiny apartment. But now, there were no walls, only eyes. So many eyes. She could feel Victor watching. She could feel the weight of his expectation, waiting for a mistake. But there was no mistake. The notes flowed from her fingers as if they had always belonged in that space. The melody swelled, rich with emotion, telling a story without needing words. And then, in that moment, Eleanor realized something. Victor had no control over her. She was not a game. She was not a joke. She was music. And no one could take that away from her. The applause wouldn't stop. It was as if the entire restaurant had just woken from a trance and now needed to express the admiration they felt. People who had never even looked at Eleanor before were now on their feet, clapping, some even murmuring, a quiet wow, as if still processing what they had just witnessed. But she wasn't looking at anyone. Her eyes were fixed on Victor. He was still there, in the same position, but without that smug smile from before. Instead of superiority, his face held something different, discomfort, maybe even irritation. Eleanor rose from the piano bench and walked back into the dining area, not in a rush, not with fear. Her steps carried something new now, confidence. Victor forced himself to recover. He straightened up, picked up his wine glass, and took a slow sip, trying to mask his embarrassment. As Eleanor passed by his table, he let out a dry, forced chuckle. "Not bad," he said, feigning disinterest. Eleanor stopped, not because she wanted to hear anything else from him, but because she knew this was the right moment to have the final word. She turned to him, calm, composed, a kind of calm that made Victor shift uncomfortably in his seat. Then, with a soft smile, she said, "Everyone has a gift, Mr. Langley. What matters is how they choose to use it. Simple as that." Victor blinked, caught off guard. He was used to setting the rules, to always being in control, but now he had no idea how to respond. Eleanor didn't wait for an answer. She turned and went back to work as if nothing had happened. But everyone knew that something had happened. Something big, the invisible waitress no one noticed. Now she was unforgettable. Eleanor went back to work, but nothing was the same anymore. Every step she took, she felt the eyes on her. Not with judgment, but with respect. Customers who once ignored her now greeted her with genuine smiles. Even Claire, her best friend, stood there wide-eyed, clutching a napkin like it was some kind of improvised trophy. "You are a damn star, Eleanor," she whispered, grabbing her arm. Eleanor just smiled. Not because she wanted to boast, but because for the first time, in a long while, she felt like she owned her own story. Victor Langley. He remained at the restaurant for a few more minutes, fiddling with his expensive ring and staring into his wine glass, as if searching for answers at the bottom of it. For the first time, he wasn't the center of attention. For the first time, he had lost a game he thought he had already won. Eleanor continued her shift, serving tables as usual, but something inside her had changed. She knew she didn't want to spend the rest of her life balancing trays, and now, she was certain she didn't have to. Later, as the restaurant began to empty, a customer approached the counter. A man in a well-tailored suit, his gaze sharp and observant. "You have an incredible talent, Miss Carter," he said, handing her a card. "I'm a music producer. If you're interested, I'd love to talk about your future." Eleanor took the card, stunned. Her future. She glanced at the piano once more, feeling that same shiver from before. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was excitement. It was the feeling that something new was beginning. She didn't have to hide anymore. She was ready to be seen, and this time the whole world would see her.